And I'm going to move on to the next keynote, which is the current state of e-commerce, our predictions, and why it's important to invest now. It's going to be presented by Dinesh Patel, who's the CEO and founder of OrderIn, as well as Enrico Ferigolli, who is the CEO and founder of Bottle, so two major brands in South Africa. Gents, welcome. You can switch your cameras on and let's get going with the presentation.
Hi, good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Nice to join you guys, Sharon. Thanks very much for having us, and hello to everybody who's listening. We've got quite a bit of content to go through, so I'm going to start sharing my screen. Give me a moment. And yes, Sharon, if you can just confirm once it's presenting on, is it presenting? Great. Hi, everybody. Again, Dinesh Patel, founder and CEO of OrderIn. We were the first on-demand food delivery app in 2012 in South Africa. Over the last 3 years, we've gone pretty quiet as we've essentially pivoted to provide the logistics and technology infrastructure to enable businesses to go on demand themselves. The slides that we're going to go through is quite a bit of content, and we're going to try to leave a few minutes for questions. So I'm going to breeze through it, but hopefully we're able to communicate the salient points from each slide. Essentially, what we've done over the last couple of years is analyze many markets around the world to understand how is e-commerce going to unfold in South Africa. And we've chosen to present US data today because it's some of the most robust data that we have available. But essentially, the lessons are exactly the same. So the first thing to look at is total retail in the United States has grown at about 3% CAGR over the last 20 years. Offline retail about 2.5%, while online retail has grown at 17% CAGR year over year. What that means is that there's a spend shift. Spend is not really necessarily increasing, but it's shifting from offline to online. Now the rules of the game of offline retail versus online retail are vastly different. What you're looking at here is a market share of Amazon versus Walmart. Walmart is in red, Amazon in green. Walmart, for context, has a store within 10 miles of 90% of Americans. So they have a store density which is unparalleled globally. But in spite of that, they only control 11% market share of total retail. Conversely, with a couple hundred fulfillment centers in the United States, Walmart controls 46% of total online retail. And so what is very clear is that online retail operates with very different rules and really tends towards a winner-takes-most environment. In fact, here's a quote from Doug McMillan, the CEO of Walmart, that says e-commerce in the US is becoming a winner-take-all industry, or at a minimum, a winner-take-most market. And what you're looking at on the right is traffic data of Amazon versus Walmart versus Target, arguably their two biggest competitors. And you can see that even over the last 3 years, despite billions of dollars of investments from both of them, they're not really making a dent into Amazon's lead. Now, to understand why these rules play out differently in offline versus online, we look at the flywheel of both business models. In the offline world, essentially merchants are capped by their physical presence. So a store can only be so big. And because a store can only be so big, they have limited selection in those stores. You have limited reach. You can only serve so many customers around you, which means that the customer experience is capped because you can't have unlimited people serving you in the store. You don't have unlimited selection, and you can't customize the experience for every single customer as they walk into your store, which means that the traffic that you can serve is capped, which in turn means that the cost to serve each individual customer has quite a high floor. Conversely, in online, you have unlimited selection and unlimited reach because the concept of shelf space does not simply exist. You can serve any customer anywhere in the world. As a result, the ability to serve customers in a highly customized and a really delightful way is uncapped. Every single customer that comes online, you can provide a bespoke experience to them without any human intervention, which leads to unlimited traffic, and unlimited traffic really attracts more sellers to your platform. And the analogy is really like having the best mall. If you own the best mall in the country, getting tenants to come and sell in your mall is really a very easy task. And more sellers increases your selection. That virtuous cycle really means that online retailers, what they can sell and how they can sell is really unlimited. And that's what leads to this winner takes most environment. The cumulative result of the two different business models and the two different rules by which offline versus online play results in quite favorable outcomes from a valuation and from an investor standpoint. And what you're looking at here is Amazon stock growth versus Walmart stock growth, and Amazon sales to enterprise value versus Walmart sales to enterprise value. Admittedly, this data is a little bit stale because this presentation is a few years old for us. This is some of the insights that we put together when we were first making our pivot. And so you can see that Amazon, is valued at 6 times what Walmart is based on the same, based on sales data, and that really underpins the dynamics of offline versus online retail. So where are we in South Africa in this migration? Thanks to COVID, we've accelerated by a couple of years. So we're, for all intents and purposes, we're around 4% of total retailers online. So we are relatively early in the migration to digital commerce, but that race has definitely begun. And so even though we are early, remember that the rules of the game are significantly different to offline retail. And so building out stores very quickly is not really as easily possible in the online space. And so what we have to recognize here is that even though we are early in the evolution, we have to start making investments immediately. So when we think about the challenges that retailers are going to face in the coming decades, we kind of think about it in 2 buckets: large retailers and SMEs. The large retailers, the biggest hurdle for them to overcome is really mindset. And the reason is because traditional retailers, their business model, the way to grow is to add more stores. But the digital world, that's not the case. And the challenge that traditional retailers face is that a lot of their balance sheets are tied up into store infrastructure, into existing supply chain infrastructure. And e-commerce requires an entirely new infrastructure, new investments, new teams, new technologies. And to rationalize the investments into those kinds of, into that category, when it's only generating 1 or 2% of your total revenue, simply does not make sense. And so that's why you've seen, admittedly, South Africa is still very early in that migration. So we haven't seen significant investments from traditional retailers yet, but I think that's starting to change. COVID has obviously been an accelerant of that. And so unfortunately, the negative virtuous cycle that traditional retailers, and this is not just South Africa, but globally, is that because it's such a small percentage of total sales, the incremental investments that they make into technology are slow. And what that does is it exacerbates the widening lead between the leading e-commerce retailer and themselves. And of course, as we all know, technology requires a lot of developers, as we heard in the previous talk. It really requires building out new capabilities and new expertise, and you've got to attract a ton of engineers to help build out this new ecosystem. And that's harder to do if you're not seen as a forward-thinking frontier company. And of course, the last thing is that traditional retailers are fighting global tech companies at the same time. Wish has just partnered with the post office to offer an amazing experience in South Africa. When we see that come to fruition is unclear, but you've got Amazon, you've got Alibaba, you've got Shine. So if you go to the App Store on iOS or Android, you'll see a lot of global companies that are retailers in the top 5, top 10 most used apps. If you're a small business, essentially what's going to happen is as winners emerge, a business will become increasingly arbitraged out of the relationship with their customers. We see this playing out in many sectors, in food delivery, in marketplaces. And so that becomes a challenge for a small business, which really causes you to have to invest in your online brand so that customers seek you out. Voice ordering and voice commerce is going to exacerbate that even further. You can imagine that when somebody wants a burger, and if they don't say, I want a McDonald's cheeseburger, and they just say, I want a burger, Alexa or Siri is going to decide which burger they want. And that becomes really complex if you're a small business. Of course, as winners emerge, they will set prices for the marketplace. And so small businesses and medium-sized businesses will become price takers, which becomes, again, a very difficult place to be. And because they're so small, it doesn't really justify the technology investments that they require in logistics and technology to fight back. And finally, of course, brand building is extremely expensive because every single retailer is trying to move online and starting to bid on Facebook and Instagram and Google search for the same customer audience. And they don't have the technical expertise. That's something that small businesses are going to have to develop. But all of this is starting to change. And so when we look at how have large retailers and how have small businesses started to fight back as the economy starts to digitize. The first thing is that large retailers are becoming technology companies. They no longer build themselves as retailers. And we've seen this over the last 5 to 10 years with Walmart, which is a great example, where Walmart has invested billions of dollars to hire engineers and data scientists, they are aggressively partnering and acquiring startups to help accelerate their ambitions. There's a great book written by Clay Christensen, The Innovator's Dilemma, which speaks to this around the importance of partnering and acquiring to help accelerate your own ambitions. Because when you're a large company, it takes time to change culture and to change processes, acquiring and partnering with startups is a great way to accelerate that. If you're a small business, it's really about leveraging as many of the free and social tools that exist. So Instagram's a great one. We see a lot of retailers, small businesses moving to Instagram. WhatsApp for Business is starting to grow rapidly in South Africa. And of course, Google My Business is a great platform to reach customers through the Google ecosystem. But what's missing in each of these platforms is still some basic infrastructure which allows a customer to get or a merchant to get a product from their store or from their home to their customers. And that's some of the infrastructure that we are very focused on building and what we've been building over the last 3 years. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Enrico, who can speak to his own personal experience in this exact journey of how the market has evolved over the last 5 years.
Thank you, Dinesh. And hi, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen quickly. I'm Enrico. I'm one of the 2 co-founders of a business called Bottles. We launched back in 2016 as the first on-demand hardcore delivery app. So if Dinesh was the first food delivery app back in 2012, we were probably the first on-demand hardcore delivery app in 2016. And there was a time when the network of on-demand fulfillment in the country was nowhere close to where it is today. So I think that's, for me, the very fascinating thing about where we are today compared to when we launched. Right? When we launched, we actually had to rely on 3 tools that 10 years ago didn't exist. Right? We literally built our entire business model on using Uber to do our deliveries, WhatsApp to talk into our stores and drivers, and Facebook to do our first round of advertising, right? So, and I think Uber specifically solved our first fulfillment challenge and got us to almost 5,000 orders before we started implementing first our own driver fleet, and then we started partnering with Dinesh and OrderIn, right? So imagine us doing 5,000 orders a month through Ubers. It was manual, it was clunky. We were basically calling Ubers with a pickup address at the bottle store and the drop-off address at the client to then call them and ask them, go inside the bottle store, fetch the order, go to the client and deliver. At some point, we were Uber's for business biggest client. We were spending R1 million a month in Uber. We had like 20, 30 phones, and it was really messy behind the curtains, but it helped us get the scale. So I think pretty much, as Dinesh has been saying in this presentation, you gotta partner or die, right? And that's where I think in 2018 we did our first major partnership with Pick n Pay that helps us to scale further, because we really needed a strong retail partner to integrate with, because we realized that to go from 20 to 100 stores, we needed to automate all the catalog creation and the product management part of the system, right? So we started partnering with Pick n Pay, and they really had the foresight to understand that to win in a completely new market, they had to partner with small and nimble players, that they couldn't just try to do it on their own, right? And then COVID hit, right? And everything was turned upside down. And in the first day, we had no business. And then after a few phone calls with Pick n Pay, right? And at that time, Pick n Pay didn't have a delivery app, and Checkers already did. And we didn't have a business. Overnight, we had a business that was 3 times the size. So my second call on that day was actually to Dinesh to say, hey, you got drivers, I got grocery, let's do this. And so we embarked on a 4 days pivot that got us from literally being a dying business with no ability to sell liquor to a business that in 4 days had 60 stores delivering grocery to people in lockdown, right? And I think that if you look at that, you can look at that as a 4 days pivot, But the way I look at it is a 4 days pivot that was 4 years in the making, because we had spent the first 4 years building the partnership, the relationship, the network that were required for us to turn around, a pivot quickly, right? At the end of last year, we agreed to sell the business to Pick and Pay, and we are now part of an exciting new journey of making grocery delivery mainstream, which is, I think, the most exciting thing of being where we are today, is that grocery is the next big on-demand frontier for us, right? And for on-demand. And I think that if you look at how this is being tackled, the whole on-demand world has woken up to the enormous opportunity, and everyone is partnering, right? GoPuff and Uber Eats are partnering, and in the US, Fancy and GoPuff are partnering in the UK, Zomato and Grocery are partnering in India. So again, partnering is key to moving faster in a space where every single piece of the puzzle is being developed to its perfection by a different player, right? When we decided that we didn't want to do our own deliveries and we started chatting to Dinesh, I think what we realized is that to build a delivery software infrastructure, you need to be focused on that. And what we wanted to focus on was the user experience, was the front end of the app. And that's why I think partnering is really important here, right? So I think in closure, where to from here? I think that we're seeing a few major trends coming up. All of the big on-demand players are going into grocery delivery, right? Because I mean, if you just think about it, how many times you order food at home, and how many times you go to restaurant versus how much money you spend on grocery, it is going to be a huge market, right? We're seeing Q-commerce and the concept of the 15 minutes delivery with Gorillas in the UK, Getir in Turkey, and now in the UK again. GoPuff, I think this is an exciting new development, right? It's going to really shake up the retail industry. I think we're seeing in continental Europe how the Q-commerce or even the online grocery delivery players are really leapfrogging the normal retailers, and it's going to be a really interesting fight to see, right? We're seeing more and more specialized players like a MadMate in Australia getting a level of share in the market. We're seeing a lot of alternative methods of collection and delivery. Now, curbside having a huge spike in the US, lockers, and a lot more methods, that are coming up in the next few years to come. So overall, I think that there isn't a more exciting industry to be in right now, and I think that solving the supply chain fulfillment challenges that this new business model face is the key to make this nascent industry big, and it's really what's exciting me a lot.
Sharon, if there's a couple of minutes and there's some questions that you'd like us to answer, we'd be happy to.
Yes, Jens, there is actually one question that's come through for you. A question from Sean Atwell. Looking forward over the medium term in e-commerce, considering the growth and ensuing dominance of someone like Amazon, is this a sustainable solution for brands? Should an omni-channel solution be diluted to pure e-commerce?
So I mean, I guess the way to think about it, which is a mistake that I think traditional retail typically makes, is to think of e-commerce as just a channel. But in reality, and if we could re-architect retail, from scratch, what we would say is that wherever a customer is, we want to be able to serve them. So if a customer is online and they're in the discovery phase, we want to make sure that we have a presence. But if they're walking to work and they happen to walk past a store and they impulsively want to walk in and be able to purchase that item, they should be able to do that as well. So I think we're very much a believer in omni-channel, right? That digital is not just a channel on its own, but it has to live, it has to be immersed inside of the total, the physical retail experience. And as Amazon, as Walmart has made significant investments into their digital experience, they're starting to leverage their physical footprint to provide a better experience, both in digital and in offline, right? So where Amazon started and didn't have any physical footprint, they're now trying to rapidly acquire malls and physical infrastructure to get closer to customers, whereas Walmart already has that infrastructure and is now trying to catch up on the digital side. So if there's any lessons, it's not that physical is, a dead asset. It's just that we've already got that asset. Start making investments into the asset that you don't have, which is digital, and leverage then your physical footprint.
Yeah, and I think that to add to Dinesh's point, I think the two things that for me are really important is that the first one is that while e-commerce in certain instances is a winner takes most market, I think that there is a lot of and especially in grocery, I would say there is a lot of space for brand, right? And the brand to have a major role. Like you look at what the Q-commerce players are doing in the UK, and sure, they can deliver stuff in 15 minutes, but they don't have the range, for example, that Asda for, Tesco for, right? And that I think is where I think the current or the incumbents can really have a role to play. And for me, the second thing is that same as Dinesh said, we're not looking at online just as a channel. We're looking at online as the future of retail and us building what is the future of retail looking like, as opposed to looking at an additional channel of sales. So if you look at, for example, how Walmart and a lot of the other retailers in the US played that with Instacart, they were very happy to be on Instacart. And I think that in the future, we will probably be as a retailer on a lot of the aggregators, because if you like to buy through an aggregator, well, why wouldn't we be there, right? And in a more partnering way, as opposed in a more like, way where you just want to consolidate everything through your doors.
All right. Dinesh, just one last question. Okay. Jamie de Villiers says to Dinesh, will OrderIn still do food delivery like Uber Eats?
No, so we actually shut down our B2C food delivery app during COVID. We had been in a strategic process of winding it down for the last 2.5, 3 years, actually. But COVID, we had actually anticipated winding it down in December of 2020, but COVID just presented a kind of a black swan event for us to be able to accelerate that, which was actually fortuitous for us. But you will not see us as a direct-to-consumer business. We are now very much an infrastructure company.
Thank you very much, James. Thank you for taking the time, and I'm going to log off this session. Please stay tuned for the next session, which will start in the next 2 minutes with SAP. Thanks, James.